Our talk today is titled Building a Green and Sustainable Singapore. So, as all of you know now, there's this whole talk about how Singapore can be more sustainable, can be more green. There's this whole Singapore Green Plan, right? 2030, which was announced during the budget just a few months ago. So today we really want to listen to our expert opinion, right? Mr. Mun Wei and of course Mr. Swee Yong. So without further ado, I'd like to I'd like to start on the questions. So for those of you who do not know, Singapore is going very much into sustainability, like I mentioned just now earlier in the talk. And this is done both on the ground level, which can be done by both corporates and individuals, and also by the government in terms of how we build, our buildings sustainably, and vertical farming, which are some of the things that I think we should discuss about later. So for the first question, I think it's good to address to Mun Wei, because he's, after all, the founder of SustainableSG, which it's pretty much the title of our talk today. So Mun Wei, why does sustainability matter to us as residents in Singapore? Would you like to share it to everybody?
Yeah, sure, Terence. I mean, in a way, I like earlier on when I kind of self-introduced, I kind of touched a bit about what sustainability is. So it's really kind of making sure, right, that the future for our kids and their kids will be just as good as it has been for us, right? So and of course the focus of sustainability has very much, especially in recent months and years, has been very much on the environmental side. But I'm glad that Swee Yong in his introduction also kind of touched on some of the other aspects, right, in terms of what makes a good society. Is really making sure that we carry with us our cousins and friends and relatives who are really, they need a bit more, they need a lot of help, right? So there's certainly that social part to it. Yeah. So in other words, and I think it's important, right? Because if you think about it, I mean, I don't think we want to live in a world where the physical environment is very harsh, right? Say in terms of really extreme weather, in terms of really hot days, and of course here in Singapore we feel we are quite fortunate, right? Because we stay in a relatively safe environment. But really, if you look beyond, right? So if you look at, say, some of the droughts, famines, and so on, so they are already impacting many of the poorer communities around the world, right?
Okay, so I would like to add on here to expand. Let's expand the sustainable definition to not just environment. So carrying on the point about making sure that there's enough for our next generation as well as their next generation. Sustainable is making sure that we are not exploiting resources today such that there isn't enough for our poorer friends and relatives, that we don't overexploit such that there is also sufficient for our children and grandchildren to live a normal, comfortable life. So it could be seen in terms of, for example, public housing. We start to buy and we stretch our last dollar to buy something, push the prices up, and then policies themselves don't keep prices affordable, but incomes are not catching up, and then that becomes not sustainable. So sustainability doesn't have to be confined to just the environment or making sure that we don't use plastic straws and throw them away too much. It could be also sustainability in terms of social sustainability, making sure that our next generation will be comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So in other words, there's an element of equality, right, in sustainability, in that you want societies to kind of treat different segments fairly, right? And there's also kind of a time-based equality element, right? Which is that we want future generations to have the same access to resources as we enjoy now. Yeah. So that's why I think it's important, right? I mean, it's really with that in mind, because we don't want a situation where we kind of draw down or deplete resources now, such that it really cripples future generations to come. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. And now everybody thinks that sustainability, this whole big topic is actually something that the youth really enjoy or they're really passionate about. But what do you think about the responsibility of maybe the more senior citizens, and what can they do on a more personal basis, or in order to push this initiative for the country as well?
Yeah, okay. I mean, first, it's understandable why the young will feel more kind of interested and motivated, right? I would say it's for two reasons. One is that they are kind of more influenced by what's in the media. So then, of course, they also have kind of, in a way, role models like Greta Thunberg, right? So that's one. So they're more exposed. And second thing is that you think about it, they'll be the ones who will be impacted a lot more, right? So because for us, particularly the older ones, we have really enjoyed a lot of good things in the past, whereas at least as far as the environmental side and arguably the social aspects of sustainability as well, I think it's really impact the youth for many more decades to come. So in that sense, they have more skin in the game, right? So but by having said that, I really think that all of us are in it together, right? So and I think that coming back to Terrence's question, so I would say that what can we all do? So I would say one is to find out more, right? So read about it, talk to friends, right? Go online. So there are really a lot of excellent videos that are available. So in fact, you can go to this website called drawdown.org. So it's actually it's an NGO headquartered in the US. So what they do is that they actually produce a lot of they've articulated what are the science-based solutions to climate change, right? And then if you go to their website, you can actually see a lot of very interesting videos that tell you a lot more about what the issues are, right? And these are very objective, well-produced content. Yeah.
So again, to add on for the younger generation, because yes, for them, the next 50 or 70 years of their lives, they might be feeling the negative repercussions more than us, because my runway is only much shorter than theirs, right? But for the older generation, I mean, I think that they have in fact started off, especially for Singapore's pioneer generation and then Merdeka generation, I thought they have started off with this concept of being frugal. Once you are frugal, you only buy generally what you need and maybe just a little bit more as a buffer. You don't buy 20 shirts of 20 colors from Giordano, for example. And so you don't overconsume. And so our parents and grandparents' generations, they probably didn't have the same green concepts as what we are talking about now, but their lifestyles were not sort of so lavish that they are over-consuming and then causing harm to the earth.
Yes. Okay, absolutely. I mean, I would say that the science has said very clearly that environmental impact equals to population times affluence times technology, right? So of which population and consumption are really the two main drivers behind a lot of the environmental damage that's being done. And I totally agree, Swee Yong. I think currently now I feel that the ideology in many countries, including Singapore, is that more is always better, right? So that, and it never ends, right? Because there's never an upper limit to how much we can earn and how much we can spend and how much you can flaunt, right? So I think
corporate profits.
Yeah.
Taxes. You spend, there's tax. You spend, the corporates earn money, and then you want it to come back full cycle, where the corporates then reinvest much more money in trying to grow the economy.
Yeah. So, and I hope to perhaps see a kind of a shift from a kind of an ideology of more to an ideology of enough, right? So in a way, we need to go back to, talk to our seniors, right? Say, and really, have a think about how we can how we need to be more frugal in how we tap on resources, right? And really to tell ourselves that, I think let's aspire for enough not only for ourselves, but enough for everybody. Yeah, and I think that is better for society. I think we'll all be happier, and also that's good for the environment. And then we can definitely extend the runway for everyone. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, you know, this whole idea that we learn in school about the 3 Rs, right? Reuse, reduce, recycle, that's all part and parcel of sustainability as well. But, you know, some people say that it does involve a lot of cost. For example, if we were to put solar panels on top of our houses, say if you stay in a landed house, or say HDB were to build solar panels on top of all the HDB roofs. So what do you think in terms of this? Like, would it be very cost prohibitive in order to ensure a more sustainable environment and you know, to combat climate change on a personal and you know, on a governmental level?
Well, I just start off, then I'm sure Swee Yong can chip in. I would say that certain things would have to cost money, right? So, but I would say as far as solar energy is concerned, the good thing about solar energy is that if you look at the cost of the kind of the life cycle cost of production, it's actually solar and wind are actually cost competitive. In fact, it's actually cheaper to invest in solar, right? To produce a kilowatt power versus building a $1 billion natural gas power plant. So the cost from an economic point of view is working out, right? But of course, in Singapore's context, and the government has said it, and there's definitely truth in it, which is that we are land constrained, right? Because solar and needs quite a bit of land to deploy. So that will be the one physical constraint that we face. But having said that, I mean, we can look for innovative solutions, and also there's been some talk about this Australian company that wants to build this gigantic solar farm, right, in somewhere near Darwin, and then there'll be a submarine cable to relay the electricity to us. I mean, I think we should look at some of these transboundary solutions.
The nearest island from Indonesia to Singapore, I think, is only 17 kilometers. Yeah. Lease the island for 25 years, deploy your solar panels. And Johor is actually very near to Singapore.
Even nearer, yes.
Plentiful land for us to lease lots of space. So this thing about land constraint is just a figment of our imagination. And
how about on water, Swee Yong? Like say on reservoirs, because I read, I don't know, is it on NEA or which website a few years ago that they mentioned they were actually exploring, you know, covering our reservoirs with solar panels. I have no idea how that whole plan is going now. They said that it not only is able to generate electricity, but you know, it kind of covers the reservoir, so it kind of lowers the rate of evaporation. You know, like we lose less water because
correct,
there's less heat heating the water. What do you think?
So all these solutions work, and I'm in fact also very pro the idea of solar, because Singapore has 365 days of sunshine, right? And our sunshine hours we manage at least 12 hours of sunshine, as compared to some of the countries in the northern hemisphere who may have 5 months of winter, and during winter they have only got maybe 4 to 5 hours of sunshine. And so we should try to invest more into solar. But that said, today we have got too much electricity already. So why do we need to invest even more? Our production capacity versus our peak consumption on any day, we are only consuming about 70% at the peak of what we are able to produce. So we've got so much electricity generation capacity that it is odd that we should be saying that let's do more for producing electricity. So meaning then, on the other hand, how did we come about having so much electricity generation capacity? So look at Jurong Island, petrochemical industry. So in addition to the 3 giant power plants, we've got a petrochemical industry where electricity is sometimes generated as a byproduct. You need steam, so you need heat for reactions. You need steam to be fed in as an ingredient to the chemical reaction. But aside from the heat and the steam that you produce, you're able to drive a turbine that produces electricity at frictional cost. And then that leads me also to the next question. How come our electricity costs seem to be relatively expensive? Why aren't we letting industry use cheaper electricity so that we are a lot more efficient and profitable? Or at least for homes, have cheaper electricity, but that's a discussion for another day, I guess.
Right. Okay. So Swee Yong, you mentioned this thing about oil industry in Singapore, right? In Jurong Island, which of course everybody in Singapore knows that Singapore is very reliant on our petrochemical industry. So question for you is, can the economy of Singapore, which is reliant on big oil, which kind of creates quite a substantial amount of pollution, can Singapore be able to survive and pivot if we were to move away from this petrochemical industry, which we are so reliant on, that creates a huge amount of our GDP?
I think it's the matter of will. So of course, for any changes to be made, we have got to suffer a little bit of pain. But do we want to do it? So 30 years ago, we still have plastic toys factories. We had garment factories. And then how come we decided to take the pain of not encouraging garment manufacturing in Singapore anymore? So the pain we have got to study the benefits and costs. And then last year, when COVID hit, we realized that not having a garment industry and not being able to manufacture your own mask within our home country is tough. So maybe let's have a nice overall relook and realize that our over-dependence on the oil and gas industry is actually preventing us from moving forward on the sustainability front.
Maybe just to add, I thought another angle is that I would say that even the oil and gas majors know that they have to pivot, right? So that, and largely, I mean, the assessment by, say, even the International Energy Agency and various other entities is that we have either reached or we would be reaching peak oil quite soon, peak fossil fuels, so that the future ahead will be increasingly moving towards renewable energy. So the oil and gas majors, they know this. So I thought actually it's an opportunity, since in fact, most of them are here. They have quite a lot of investments here. It's really to work with them to look into how we can green their operations, right? I mean, maybe I give a specific example. So one of the new emerging technologies is this thing called carbon capture and storage, right? So basically you, there are certain chemical processes you can put in place that absorbs the CO2 that is produced, say, when you are doing cracking, right? So that means breaking down the petrochemical products into byproducts. So and you capture the CO2 and then you pump it deep underground. So that means you stop it from being emitted into the environment. So these are all the things that are that can be done. They're very expensive, these technologies, but because they're here and I think it's a matter of kind of a bit of a nudging, maybe putting a bit of a carrot and stick approach and working with these companies, right, to kind of, because they know they have to pivot. So let's kind of co-invest with them and look for some of these kind of solutions.
Yes. So on that point, what happens if the two giant-sized oil companies who are in Singapore decided that they are moving away from fossil fuel products much faster than what they have announced? Then that would immediately mean that Singapore, because these two large companies who have invested in Singapore for over 100 years, if they were to move away, would our infrastructure in Jurong Island and the petrochemical industries that have been built up around their crackers, would we then be forced to also quickly move away? So are we going to depend on their decision, or are we going to work with them to sort of make the shift together?
Of course. So so therein the question comes is that, is Singapore able to survive if we try to pivot away from big oil and say if we want to focus on other methods of renewable energy, right? Be it solar, wind. Okay, like Singapore don't have that much wind, or tidal energy and stuff like that. Would we be able to be a global leader and be able to make in a way, as much revenue as what we have in big oil?
So what I suspect from reading the very cursory announcement about the Green Plan 2030, and as well as looking at the budget allocations of $30 million for EV, electric vehicle charging, and there's a huge bunch that starts with billions, which is that Singapore wants to get into the market of green financing, green bonds. So we certainly have sufficient talent in Singapore in our financial services market, as well as consultants like Mun Wei, who can help companies move into green businesses. So if there were, say, a giant wind farm or a huge tidal energy farm being built in Indonesia, Australia, Malaysia, we could be the financiers. We could arrange and we could structure the public-private partnership schemes. We could be the ones who help with the impact assessment. So we could still be the consultants and project managers for a lot of these green projects, plus supply the money to realize these large projects. So we can still have skin in the game and make a profit out of it.
Sure. Okay. So before we move into the Green Plan 2030, which I was talking about just now, Swee Yong, you mentioned something about carbon bond and the green bond and stuff like that. So maybe Mun Wei, you want to shed some light onto our carbon taxes, right? Do you think that the imposition of carbon taxes is a good way to force companies to think green?
Okay, so currently now the carbon tax is $5 per ton, right? So and then there is a schedule to review it, so that and I believe the government has mentioned that they want to raise it to about $10 to $15. Okay, so but I think so if you ask me, my own view is that I think it's a good thing that we have a carbon tax. So but the amount I think you need to ratchet it up, right? So that it really makes so that at least the businesses that are impacted would really want to shift towards kind of greener energy, right? So okay, so that's my first comment. But the thing is that actually the idea of a carbon tax is widely accepted to be a effective mechanism, but the caveat is that actually very few countries have implemented it. In fact, it's only, I think off the top of my head, I think it's only Canada and I believe California, right? So I think those, and I believe there's some, in Europe, they have a different system. They call it a cap and trade system. So they don't have, if I'm not wrong, I don't think Europe has implemented a carbon tax. Yeah. My other comment is that, so currently now the carbon tax only kicks in if you are a giant emitter. So I believe the cutoff is something like 25,000 tons of CO2 emission. So by that cutoff, so currently only about 30 to 40 companies would have to pay a carbon tax in Singapore. So I feel that if we want the carbon tax, I mean, because if you think about it, the carbon tax, it does two things. Well, one is that it changes behavior. Two is the signaling effect. So, and if you want them to be effective, I feel that the carbon tax threshold should be lowered, right? Yeah, so that at least more companies would kind of be nudged along in that shift.
So these companies paying the carbon tax are already generally profitable to the tune of billions a year. And so to them paying the carbon tax, no big deal, right? But what exactly are we doing with the carbon tax money? So if you could, for example, road tax and COE collections are supposed to be piled back by Ministry of Transport, to improve road systems, traffic lights and stuff, right? So if we could somehow channel carbon tax to people who are in fact already very pro-environment and practicing all the correct green initiatives, and then we reward them by paying back the carbon tax to these companies that are already environmentally friendly. then that would encourage even better behavior, because other than the stick, which is the tax, you ought to have the carrot to be given away to people who are already doing their best for the environment.
Well, since you mentioned now about carrot and the stick, right? What do you think actually works better, right? To get Singaporeans and Singapore companies to be more involved in sustainability. Do you think that this incentivization and penalty system works? And maybe if it does, which works better? Does a carrot or the stick work more, you know?
I would be asking for both the carrot for people who default, as well as the stick for people who default, and for the carrot to be given to recognize those who are conscientious and are very responsible in their day-to-day actions.
Are there maybe any other better methods than just to punish or to reward people? Is there maybe a better system that the Singaporeans or the government can explore to make people more socially conscious?
Yeah. So maybe I add to that. I think a very commonly, something that's close to all our hearts, everybody talks about it, and particularly the younger crowd, is recycling, right? So, and very often the narrative is really centered around, oh, we need more public education. We need more public education. People don't know where to put their things and so on. So I feel that, coming back to Terence's point, I think we need to take a systemic approach, right? So basically, there is no single magic bullet, right? So, but we need a variety of things. So as far as recycling is concerned, for instance, right, you need to incentivize good behavior, right? Say, and you also need to have penalties. So that's why I'm one of the people who is for having a mandatory charge when you go to the supermarket and you ask for bags, plastic bags, right? So in other words, and so the third element is actually regulations. Like for instance, in many countries in Europe, for instance, you are required by law to sort your rubbish, right? So if you don't sort your rubbish and you're found out, okay, then you'll be ticketed, right? You have to pay a fine or something, right? So in Singapore currently now, again, the way we approach recycling is really a lot of moral suasion, you know, a lot of kind of nice feel good videos, and so I think that's important. I think that's good, right? Because you want people to support it and do it willingly, but I don't think that's enough, right? So because otherwise, if you look at the current state, for instance, plastics recycling, and I think NEA just released their latest report, is still an abysmal 4%, right? So only 4% of single-use plastics are recycled in Singapore.
I remember a carrot in my younger days, when I finish a bottle of soft drink and I bring that glass bottle back to the provision shop, I get back a few cents, right? So that is carrot. Right now, we only have the stick, where if I'm at a supermarket and I ask for an extra plastic bag that they want to charge me, so the stick is there, the carrots are not there. So the carbon tax is a stick. And if we can use the carbon tax not just as a revenue source for the government, but that the government then rechannels this tax back to encouraging good behavior, that would make things work much better.
Sure. How about upcycling? You know, like if say we go to the beach and collect all these cans and bottles and whatnot, that we can repurpose them. Do you think that's a very good effort?
Collect from the beach, bring it to a nearest provision shop or recycling center, and collect a few cents back. So even people who are, say, jobless might try to get some money out of collecting plastic bottles, right?
Better than collecting cardboard for exercise, is it? Like, you know.
I think the exercise factor would also contribute a lot. Yes.
Okay. Well, you know, talking about all this recycling and all this effort, right? I'm sure the Singapore government is actually also looking towards recycling as a big initiative. And like what we mentioned just now, there's this whole thing about Singapore Green Plan 2030. So Singapore Green Plan 2030, actually, we're looking at investing quite a lot over the next 10 years. And of course, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong also did mention about 100 billion over 100 years. But over the next 10 years, you know, they want to dedicate, I think, $5 billion to coastal and drainage flood protection measures. That's all part of the Singapore Green Plan, which, ladies and gentlemen, if you are interested, it's all on the internet. The government actually has a Singapore Green Plan website dedicated to it where you can find out a bit more. But I'd like to find out from our speakers, your thoughts on the Singapore Green Plan 2030, and are there any areas that can be beefed up on, or currently maybe lack a bit of focus on, which we can really try to change?
I am unsure that the Green Plan has been finalized. So while preparing for this discussion, went to visit the Ministry of Environment website and read through what was discussed in Parliament, and it seems that the Green Plan isn't a finalized plan yet. And in fact, the planners are probably looking for ideas.
Yes, and they do want Singaporeans to also contribute some ideas. So that I guess that's where you two can come in right now.
In fact, we did last year. He and I, we together with another two partners, we submitted a proposal because Paya Lebar Air Base will be shifting out around the year 2030.
Correct.
And so there are calls for ideas to replan the entire Paya Lebar Air Base, the runway and all. And our proposal, which didn't win.
So it's not reflected in the Green Plan?
It's not, but we have proposed reforesting the entire Paya Lebar Air Base and then creating a little bit, not very much, extra livable space and workspace within a newly forested patch of Paya Lebar Air Base. And on the runways, we have proposed wind farms, as well as bringing back natural environment. So we wanted Paya Lebar Air Base to be the new green lung that would provide more oxygen and capture more carbon for Singapore.
Well, I think they're trying to do something like that at Tengah also, isn't it? Like they want Tengah to be some sort of green town and stuff like that.
But still, we have demolished a lot of trees. We have cut down a lot of trees in order to rebuild Tengah. And so are you really able to compensate back what you have cut down? So it's very odd.
So maybe coming back to Terence's point, also building on what Swee Yong is saying. So I would say that there are two items on my wish list for the Singapore Green Plan. So one is perhaps, since Swee Yong touched on deforestation. So my number one wish list item will be really for Singapore to adopt a zero deforestation goal, right? Because I mean, quite frankly, I mean, we go around, I think generally the sense is that even you talk to, say, planners, architects, and so on, which is that I think the sense is that I think we can optimize our current stock of developed land, right, without having to chop down more trees, right? So,
and in addition, we have already been reclaiming 2 square kilometers of land for the last 60 years in a stretch, meaning we have reclaimed 120 to 130 square kilometers of land, and we have yet to build on a lot of them. Go take a look at the new Pulau Tekong now.
Yeah, because I thought maybe an area of a bit of inconsistency in the Green Plan is that there's a goal to plant 1 million trees, but the plan is silent on deforestation. So I thought really, ideally, we want to really have a cap, right? Say no more deforestation, and over and above that, plant 1 million trees. I think that's
so. What is the net increase in trees, right?
Yeah,
you could plant 1 million, but you have actually chopped down 900,000. So that target is just a net increase in 100,000 trees. Yeah. And do you really want to count trees that are along our pavements? Because that doesn't count as anywhere near a forest.
Yeah, and also from an environmental point of view, I mean, it's not the same, right? Say a forest, there are other co-benefits, right? Beyond, say, the carbon sequestration. I mean, it protects flora and fauna, and it's also places where that we can all enjoy, right? Okay, but then maybe very quickly, if I can come back to the second item on my wish list, which is that, again, if you go to I think it's greenplan.gov.sg, so they talk about the objectives, and one of them was that, one of the stated objectives is that it is supposed to support our commitment to the Paris Climate Agreement, right? So, but what I feel is missing in the current Green Plan is that there are actually no annual targets on emission reductions, right? So, and okay, the government has a longer term pathway, but I thought what will be useful, it's a bit like if you look at GDP, right? Every quarter, the Ministry of Trade Industry comes out to announce how we're doing on the GDP, right? So, and so likewise, right? I mean, if we think that really climate security, climate change is so important, then we should have at least minimally an annual report card on how well we are doing, so that
let's start
everybody
measuring. Let's
yeah.
start measuring and reporting what we measure. Yeah, and it is odd that you mentioned that there's this new website and new organization. Yesterday, I attended a sustainability webinar led by the Ministry of National Development, and the total number of organizations that supported it, and these are ministries and state boards, they are what, 15 different logos, all related to sustainability. I think that's a little bit over the top, and coming back to being frugal and not overusing resources. Why do you need to create so many new organizations, printing new name cards, having new letterheads? And of course, the benefit is that we are creating jobs, but we may also be creating unnecessary bureaucracy, and that's what's hurting the climate.
Right. So you think all this red tape is actually just slowing down our plan for a proper green plan?
Could be, or it might generate a lot of noise, but little real forward action.
Okay, my perspective is a bit different, because I feel that, again, kind of based on my work currently now as a trainer and as a consultant, which is that sustainability is a vertical and a horizontal. So in the sense that there are certain things which are kind of specific to sustainability, right? Say like sustainability reporting, say carbon accounting and so on. But at the same time, you really need all the agencies to come in, right? So, in the sense that, let's say even, and it's good, right? I mean, like, I think even the Ministry of Defense recently, they announced that they are also looking at ways to reduce their carbon emissions. So I would say, hopefully those 15 logos is because those 15 agencies have committed to supporting Singapore's sustainability aspirations.
Okay, so let me then add on with what has been happening in the built environment. So in the real estate development and construction side, there's been many seminars and talk over the last 10, 15 years, in fact, about construction waste, about construction being able to go more efficient such that we generate less waste, and also that whatever we build could be a lot more sustainable and environmentally responsible. So one of the program is, for example, the Green Mark. The Building and Construction Authority has a Green Mark award for buildings that want to refurbish themselves, or for new buildings that have yet to be built. But looking at the scoring system of the Green Mark, it is a long sort of list of things that sound and look good, such as smart building management systems. But then you question, how do you define smart versus not smart? So while the plan, the scheme is good in that it forces people who want to be labeled as a Green Mark Gold or Green Mark Platinum, it forces us to think more carefully and more responsibly when we design the new building. It doesn't say too much about maybe you are throwing away 5 additional tons of cement that you have bought that it has damaged during construction because somebody messed up during the construction process, or that you have over-ordered additional 2 tons of steel, and then that has gone to waste. The other thing is that while we have got these nice labels for Green Mark, we didn't think about whether the building itself is easy to maintain for the next 20 to 30 years. Because for us, there's still this disposable type of mentality where anything that is after 10 years, if you want it to go en bloc, you merely need 80% of owners to vote for it to go en bloc, and a developer can come in, buy up the en bloc, tear down the building, and create another 100 tons of waste, and then rebuild the building. So some of these long-term maintenance and sustainability issues, we should also be giving scores to, not just giving a good score to somebody who can design and build the building today.
Oh, okay, sure. So you did mention about this whole BCA Green Mark. So for viewers who do not know, there are, I think now maybe more than 2,000 buildings which actually have been awarded the BCA Green Mark, and that's quite a substantial number. You know, the very notable ones, you have like your Park Royal at Pickering, right? You can see on the outside facade, your Changi Airport Terminal 3 on the inside, one whole wall of green, and of course places like educational institutions, you know, ITE, College Central, and all this. But so you mentioned the downsides of it, right? Maintenance, that's one of the points which you raised. So is it actually a lot more expensive to even build such green buildings, and is it a lot more expensive to maintain and build all this kind of a green mark?
I don't think it is more expensive to actually build, but it is that during the design process, if you could think about water and its use and whether you can salvage some wastewater and reuse the water, how do you take care of waste management of the building? How might you save electricity? So during the design process, understand where the sunshine is across 12 months of the year, where might be rain and monsoon hitting on the building and stuff. So during the design process, you are actually a lot more thoughtful and you think deeper, and therefore you design a building that is a lot better and good for the environment, good for the users. But when you mention Changi Airport T3 or even Jewel at Changi, they can get any Green Mark award at the beginning for the design. But going into Changi T3, I see a lot of glass. You are building a greenhouse, in fact. And so how much electricity are you generating in order to use that building in the next 20 years? And then for Jewel itself, how much water and how much electricity are you using to pump that water, as well as cool the environment, because the entire Jewel is a greenhouse.
Yeah, so maybe just to add on, because generally for most buildings in Singapore, energy consumption for air conditioning, or rather air conditioning contributes to more than 50% of the electricity consumption.
Oh, that's a lot.
And Swee Yong is right, and it's just that, and architects love glass, right? I mean, they look nice, they bring in a lot of natural lighting, but from a cooling perspective, it's actually, it's not a good material to use, right? So because it actually, the glass creates a greenhouse effect, right? So then I thought another, okay, I have another comment regarding the green mark, which is that I think something to bear in mind, kind of taking a step back, is that I wish we can take a more conservation mindset, right? So that, because I find, and I think we all know, right? I mean, so many kind of beloved buildings have been put down in years, right? So including the Red Brick National Library some years back. So I would say that I would see, I see a shift, right, towards the country being more conservation minded. But because, so why, but I think other than kind of the heritage perspective, there's also an environmental perspective, which is that actually concrete, which is what we need to build buildings, it contributes to 8% of global emissions. Yeah, it's a huge emission contributor, right? Okay, reason being that when you make concrete, you need a lot of energy, right? You have to mix all the sand, limestone, and so on. And over and above that, there's also a chemical reaction that goes on, which is that you're converting the calcium carbonate into calcium oxide. And in the process, right? Okay, I'm speaking in front of a chemist here. So in the process, it releases CO2, right? So that's why ideally, from an environmental point of view, I mean, it's actually better to stretch the lifespans of existing buildings and try to repurpose them than to be too merry in tearing down and building and having new builds.
So each year we launch about 30, this year maybe we may launch up to 50 new residential projects. And whenever you have a new launch, there is a show flat that sits on an empty piece of grassland. And then after the project has sold well, maybe 18 months later, this show flat is demolished and you're generating new waste. Why should we be allowing so much to go into a show flat, and then in addition, the construction site is going on generating additional waste? So does the BCA Green Mark actually take into account the fact that while your construction project may have a platinum status, but outside of this construction project, you have actually wasted another 5 tons of material in creating a new show flat and then subsequently tearing it down when you've sold out the project? So I'm saying that while we have got all these 15 or 20 logos of agencies that are supposed to be pro-sustainability and pro-Mother Earth, it just doesn't seem that we have a well thought through love Mother Earth type of plan.
Sure. Okay, so we do want to get a lot of questions from the ground, and I do see we have quite a substantial number of questions. So I think I'll just go through one last point before we actually take questions from the ground. So, you know, just now you were mentioning, Swee Yong, about the airport being a greenhouse, right? Or this glass, and not only airport, I mean pretty much all the buildings in Singapore, like what Mun Wei also mentioned, for architecture design purposes, that we use a lot of glass, and this require air conditioning, or rather additional air conditioning and energy expenses. So, you know, there's this talk in the past few years, right? A lot of people talking about subterranean construction. You know, they are talking about, oh, we want to build underground storage, underground residential places, underground even shopping malls. So, you know, your expertise is on real estate construction and all this. So, what do you think about this whole subterranean construction in Singapore? Is that a good way to go forward? Because remember, we are quite land constrained, right? So, should we go that way?
I think there's no such thing as a real land constraint once you can increase plot ratio to 3, 4, or 5, right? So, looking at some of the older locations such as Tanglin Halt, Commonwealth, Sterling Road, Queensway, when you tear down what we used to call Zap Lao Chu, you tear down a 10-story HDB flat, what you have rebuilt there is 40 stories. So why is there this concept of a land constraint? And then building underground, just a normal condo underground car park versus an above ground car park, the underground car park is at least 50% more costly per square foot to build. So an above ground car park might cost you up to 100 Sing dollars per square foot. The underground car park for the same number of square feet would cost $150 per square foot. That sort of a number, because of waterproofing, and then because of the weight of the foundation, plus you're probably going to be putting more things above that underground structure. So you have got to strengthen it additionally. So going underground, I think, only really works and makes sense if we use it as an underground logistics and warehouse movement system, preferably when it is driverless, without humans in those trucks. And so then you remove commercial vehicle movements and you put them underground, leaving the surface transport for other commercial and passenger use.
Sure, but in terms of energy usage, right? Because now you don't have the sun shining in, right? Because it's underground. So would it actually save more energy or actually waste more energy in the long run?
It brings additional other sets of issues, because now you have to make sure that there's an air extraction system as well as a air pumping in air as well as pulling out air, right? And then also the long-term waterproofing. We've seen some parts of CTE tunnels that are sort of leaking, right? So the long-term maintenance, and then what happens again, the reminder of the last 2 days is the submarine that disappeared. What happens if you get a power outage that then prevents all this airflow system from, and of course, there's the other thing that is disease. In an underground sort of an environment, is it a lot higher in terms of the risk of transmissions of bacteria and stuff?
Right, very, very good points. Yeah, I think these are things that, you know, people don't usually think about, is that your air circulation underground, because now you're underground, your air come from where? Come from the soil, cannot be, right? So that there has to be all these additional safeguards in place. So maybe Mun Wei, with your expertise on advising all these corporations, would you want to shed some light onto this, or maybe have any companies actually come to you asking about building underground or underground storage and stuff like that?
Okay, so when I was working, maybe just to tell a story, right? So when I was working in Sentosa, then of course I was heading the corporate planning team. Then we were always looking at out of the box ideas. Then one of the ideas that my colleagues and I this was nothing official. So that we talked about was whether to complement Sentosa Cove, we could have Sentosa Cave, right? So, but okay, I mean, so again, so maybe that's kind of a lighthearted thing, but I totally echo what Swee Yong is saying, right? So I think there are a lot of cost implications, a lot of operational issues, and I guess the other thing is also really, it's also maybe a psychological thing, right? I mean, how many of us would want to live in a dungeon, right? So where you have no natural light, right? So, and because I recall, right, I think in some like I recall visiting a block in Hougang, so where the shop, there was a bunker, probably it was an air raid shelter or something in the basement, and then it was rented out to a tuition center. Yeah, so and I went inside, it was a very uncomfortable feeling, I felt, right? So I felt a bit claustrophobic. But of course, if it's something transactional, I don't mind. If I have to send my kid for tuition, or I have to go to the 7-Eleven down below to buy some stuff, that's okay. But asking people to live in that kind of environment, I think that's a bit of a tough step.
Yeah, and the underground logistics system, if you've got trucks that are polluting, and that's why it doesn't work only if it is electric vehicle and probably when it is driverless, such that you minimize human activities underground, then that underground logistics and warehousing system would work.
Sure. Okay, gentlemen, so in the interest of time, right, I think because on our webinar now, quite a number of audiences have actually posed up some questions. So why not, let me just take some questions from the ground. Okay, so first question from Hang Chong. He asked, should Singapore consider Xing short-haul flights for real project for sustainability purposes? And do you guys support the HSR to KL project despite its cancellation? So this is talking quite a lot on the real project. So what do you think?
I totally support the KL Singapore Express Rail. In fact, my first job in Singapore Airlines was as a route planner, and we had wanted it even in the early 1990s. However, if you look at the entire project in its totality, how Malaysia see it might be not as favorably as how we would see it, because in the end, it might be sort of a win-win situation where Singapore wins a little bit more and Malaysia wins a little bit less. So, for example, KL to Singapore in an hour, and then you reach Changi Airport and you can fly out. So meaning that Changi Airport then has the ability to pull a lot more Malaysian travelers to depart from Changi Airport rather than fly out of KLIA. So that's one sort of a loss of revenue to KLIA. Secondly, if the currencies remain imbalanced like that, so say you have got a medical professional around KL area, he can work in Singapore and at 8 p.m. he's back home having dinner with his family, and his specialist income salary here is way higher than what he would be getting in ringgit terms in Kuala Lumpur, right? So there might be more of a brain drain then for the Malaysian economy. So while I personally support having this express train, I'm not sure whether our neighbors view it as favorably as we do.
Well, I would say from an environmental sustainability perspective, so generally, land travel is better, right, than air travel, right? So in the sense that, of course, the unit, if you want to have a kind of a common denominator, is what they call, say, passenger kilometer, right? Say one passenger traveling 1 kilometer, what is the carbon emissions, right? So and then and trains are actually the most efficient mode of transport from that perspective. So in that sense, I'm all for it. Yeah. So, but of course, but of course, ideally we should have a kind of pan-ASEAN kind of a train system, right? So where we can take a train, not only to Malaysia but even to Bangkok for the matter. But of course, the challenge is that there are a few countries involved, so there are all these kind of economic issues, maybe a bit of geopolitical issues that need to be resolved. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So second question, addressed from Alfred Hong to, okay, he's addressing to Mun Wei, but his name is actually Mun Wei. So, ladies and gentlemen, our NCMP's name is Leong Man Wei, but this is Chan Man Wei. So it's they are totally not related at all. So the question from Alfred to Man Wei is, what recent initiatives does your company SustainableSG run? Do you want to share?
Okay, so my company, I do a variety of things. Of course, I as Terence mentioned, I teach I'm an adjunct. So I teach on things like sustainable materials. I'm actually teaching a module now on leading for sustainability. So then and I guess for me, I also do, I would say, projects that I'm interested in. Say in sustainability, like I'm advising a community organization now on sustainability reporting, right? So as in how they want to approach it. I recently finished or at the tail end of doing a carbon footprint for a really interesting online content company. Yeah. So then I guess after the exercise, the company has realized that actually they have a better sense of what's contributing to their carbon footprint. Then they can do something about it. Yeah. So it's quite my work is quite varied because I enjoy the opportunity of meeting new companies, right? Because I have to pitch, right? So then, and very often, even if I don't get the job, but at least I like it that I learn something about the industry and the organization's context. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Man Wei. And for those of you who just joined us recently and missed the initial introduction, both Man Wei and Swee Yong here, they are adjunct lecturers at the different universities in Singapore. So if there's any questions that you want to ask them, please feel free. And so now we have a question from Richard to Swee Yong. So Richard is asking about the small home unit for sustainability. So maybe Swee Yong, you want to just give your insights on the small home units.
Okay, if I read the question correctly, it would be
how should we start off the initiative from small home unit for sustainability?
Meaning, how do we work with our family to start off on this sustainability journey? If that's the case, then I would say between parents and children, let's just learn how to live comfortably with enough rather than over-consume resources. So instead of buying a dozen cans of canned food and then not being able to finish them up in 6 months, why don't we buy just 6 cans, for example? But I could have also read the question the other way around, which is Singapore now has a proliferation of a lot of shoebox units
the
and
Mickey Mouse houses.
Mickey Mouse units are studios or even 1 bedrooms that are just 500 square feet. And yes, on the energy usage side, especially those units that are slightly smaller, and especially because the less preferred units are those with west sun facing. And so the west sun facing ones, generally, in order to move them faster, developers would develop the smaller size units so that the absolute quantum of purchase would be lower. And so these west sun facing units, if they are studio units as well, all of them need to sort of fire up the air conditioners a lot in order to cool the unit. Whereas if you are having a 1,300 square feet unit, on one side you may have a west sun, but that side will be hot. The rest of the 1,300 square feet, there will be cooler spots inside, and it wouldn't take as long to cool down if it's a hot afternoon. So yes, there's a little bit of sort of sustainability issues we face when we build so many Mickey Mouse units.
Yeah, maybe building on Swee Yong's earlier point about families, what you do, and because I also noticed that there was a question on food waste. So okay, I was looking at our national waste statistics. So apparently, on average, every family we throw out about 1.5 kilograms of waste every day, right? Of which half of this comes from food waste. Right. So that's why I think, and something that all families can start, right? And it's good. It's good for the environment. It's good in terms of teaching the kids. It's good for the pocket, which is please cut down on food waste, right? So because very often we buy much more than we can eat.
Let's invest in larders. In my primary school days, every family in the kitchen there is a larder, and that's where your half-eaten food gets left over. Tomorrow, my grandma would throw in an extra egg and fry them up, and then it becomes a little bit more of a rojak meal sometimes when you are putting in 3 or small portions of leftovers. But that goes back to my earlier point about being frugal.
Sure. Okay, so now moving on to the next question by Tristan. I think it's probably addressed to both of you. How can Singapore balance between economic benefits from commercialism versus sustainability effort?
So let's rewind and ask ourselves, what is the definition for economic benefits? Is the economic benefit purely measured by the dollar that you earn, purely measured by this concept called GDP? Or do you want to measure your wealth and happiness in other ways? A dollar value could still be measured, but the dollar value could be a lower priority. You could measure how about rewarding everybody with a national bonus for consuming less. So then let's measure what we are consuming today as the baseline. And if next year we can consume less of that same, let's say, water, electricity, then everybody gets a national bonus. In that case, I think our behaviors would change drastically, and we would really be protecting our resources, water, electricity.
Yeah, I mean the fact that every quarter, right, we hear about the GDP figures being released. It goes to show that the government, I mean, rightfully thinks that it's important. But I think we've also reached a stage where GDP can't be the only thing, and certainly not. I feel shouldn't be the most important thing, right? So we should really be looking at a basket of indicators, and that could be maybe the subject of a national conversation, right? In terms of how we want to build Singapore for the future.
So, for example, the civil service bonus is contingent on GDP growth. So why not we weight it down with the civil service bonus would be GDP growth minus how much carbon increase or decrease we use every year. So if as a country, we actually have reduced carbon in the following year, then your GDP growth minus carbon gives the civil service all a bigger bonus. So let's start bringing in other forms of measurements, because economic success shouldn't be just measuring the dollar, because we are unable to measure whether our children and grandchildren will be benefiting from what we have as a dollar today.
Okay, well, I have just a personal question of my own. Because I'm interested in electric cars and this whole electrification, right? So in your opinion, do you think that electric cars is a good way forward? And would you personally maybe buy a Tesla or say whatever other car brands that are producing electric cars now? Would you consider it?
Sure. Okay, so from a life cycle perspective, electric cars, they would generate less emissions, right, compared to a normal petrol or diesel powered car. Okay, so but having said that, it's not a perfect solution. Okay, reason being that basically what happens when you drive an EV is that your tailpipe emissions get transferred to the smokestack, right? Because particularly in countries like Singapore, because our electricity comes from burning natural gas. 95% of our power comes from burning natural gas, right? So we don't have a emission-free grid, right? So over and above that, there are also other forms of environmental impact. So one of which, if you think about it, even Tesla, right, still uses steel and lithium batteries and tires as well, right? Because what a lot of people don't realize is that tires, our modern day car tires, there are actually a lot of plastics in it. And in fact, tire wear is a major contributor of microplastics that end up in our waterways and in the air, right? So, okay, I mean, so in other words, EVs are better than petrol and diesel powered cars, but they are by no means an optimal solution. And actually I feel we should still continue to encourage everyone to take public transport. And if at all, I think my view is that why don't we make public transport free, right? So let's use all the taxes, your COE, your vehicle tax and so on, right? And use that money, make public transport free for everybody.
That would totally change behavior. Okay, just to add another point about EVs. EVs, I think, have a simpler transmission system and gearboxes as well. So there are fewer parts. And so overall, it should contribute some back to the environment. However, when we keep measuring economic growth and prosperity using dollars, the EVs would also reduce the total number of car mechanics needed, repair workshops that are needed, right? So maybe that's why we seem to be dragging our feet on encouraging EVs. Hong Kong has been giving away free electricity to EV charging in all their commercial buildings in the last 6 or 7 years. We have got excess electricity. We could do the same.
Okay, well, in the interest of time, I'll just take one final question from Yong Kang. So his question would be, last year during COVID, it showed food security issues, right? So do you think that vertical farming is the way to go? Does anybody want to take this last question?
Again, it is how much we desire to do farming. And right now, looking at the budget allocated, looking at the schemes that are being handed out, the rooftop parking scheme, which is potentially 9-year-long project, I still do not see real urgency in dealing with this subject. If we really want to be sustainable to 30% or 40% of our food needs, then I would suggest that we set aside proper land, proper long-term space on HDB car park rooftops to encourage people to start to get vegetables or even fish.
I think it's important. So, but I would say I would approach it from kind of two kind of perspectives. So one is that I think this thing about job security, maybe we should couple it with a drive to encourage people to eat less meat, right? So because why is because generally for the same hectare of land, you can grow a lot more crops than you can have livestock, right? So whether chickens, cows, and so on. Okay, so and that's better for health. We can squeeze more protein out of every hectare of land that we have, and it's also better for the environment, right? So that's my first suggestion. My second point will be that and kind of linked to what Swee Yong was saying, right? I mean, because how many of us want to be farmers, right? So, but I thought maybe what we need to do is to encourage people to try, right? And let's start with the schools, right? Because in a way, I mean, my kids. So I have 3 kids. My youngest, she's in secondary school. And I find that maybe what's lacking in our system, in our schools, is really more hands-on things, kind of life skills. Right? I mean, they talk about life skills in perhaps a bit more abstract terms, but
gardening
I feel that,
class.
Yeah, gardening and cooking, right? I think these are the real life skills. And you know what? And what's unfortunate is that at least, and the more illustrious the schools are, in fact, they don't teach these things at all. Right. So, and I feel that actually let's bring back gardening and cooking and make it compulsory and technical, right? The good old days, make it compulsory for all our students.
In fact, I've written a piece suggesting that perhaps for the 22 or 24 months of national service, every soldier needs to dedicate 1 month to manning a plot of vegetable farm in every single camp out there.
That is proper national service, right?
Exactly. And during times of emergency, all of our NS men have got basic guarding skills.
Fantastic idea. So just a final follow-up. This is based on SG Green Plan. So let me just read out something that's related to the previous question. Is that over here they have this pointer. If I were to just read it word for word, safeguarding food security, produce 30% of our nutritional needs locally and sustainably by 2030 through developing land and sea space and skilled workers, funding support and promoting R&D. So do you think that's a feasible target, right? Would producing our own food sustainably through vertical farming and all these kind of things, do you think 30% is a achievable target?
Okay, so what I understand is that I think currently we are at 10%. So it's actually quite a big jump because, and it's also a moving target, right? Because as our population continues to grow, okay, albeit slowly, but the food, I mean, the amount of food that we need to put on the table would also increase, right? So I think I think it's possible if, let's say, all of us apartment dwellers, we have a little garden, right? So at least then at least, in other words, it's a bit of a crowdsource approach.
Well, you have got a very large organization called the PA with lots of space in community centers. Every single community center could allocate a plot. Every residence committee could also allocate plots. And let's just get in. I mean, 20 years ago, being a childcare teacher was not so glamorous, but after we realized it, we have a shortage of it. We encourage by giving incentives and by giving scholarships for people who want to take the diploma programs. And suddenly now it looks like it is glam. So people will get in. Nursing is the same story. Now, many youngsters do not mind getting into a nursing job. 30 years ago, it seems like, well, Singaporeans do not really like to do this type of job. So that perception can be changed. But do we want it or not?
So you're suggesting that we can try to propagate new age farmers.
And
right?
Yeah, let's make farming hip again.
Sure. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, due to our time constraints, we would have to end our talk over here. However, before we end, please just let me give a quick introduction again, or if you want to call it an outroduction of our both our speakers, both Mun Wei and Swee Yong over here. So for those of you who missed it earlier, in the earlier part of the talk, just another brief overview about Mr. Swee Yong. He's the author of 6 books, and I actually have his latest one with me right here. The latest one is called, okay, I don't know whether you can actually see it. It's called The Future of Real Estate. And it can be bought at Kinokuniya, Times, and also the Popular Bookstore. So definitely do support it, especially for those of you younger viewers who are looking to enter the real estate market. This is a real gem of a book. And he is the CEO of International Property Advisor. And if you would like to reach out to him, you can do so on Facebook, or he also has a Telegram group called Swee Yong Real Estate. Okay, so for Mr. Chan Mun Wei, he runs SustainableSG. I believe that you have heard this name many times just now over during the talk. So SustainableSG works with different organizations to develop and implement sustainable strategies. And something about him personally, he comes with a practitioner's creed as he was looking after corporate planning, sustainability during his almost 10 years as Divisional Director of Corporate Planning at Sentosa Development Corporation. And something for that I think would interest all of you if you are either in a school or non-profit organization is that Mr. Chan and SustainableSG, they provide talks that are free of charge for schools and non-profit organizations. So do visit his website at www.sustainablesg.net or his Facebook SustainableSG. With that, we would like to thank both our speakers, Mun Wei and Swee Yong. Thank you very much for joining us today. And as a signing off statement, I'd like to ask for any feedback that any of you viewers might have regarding sustainability, you know, the kind of things that you feel PSP or Singapore can really raise. We would like to gather your ideas, your feedback, and something in which we can also push forth in Parliament on through our NCMPs, Hazel and Mun Wei. So once again, thank you for joining us today, and we wish you a very pleasant day. Thank you.